Tokyo 1990X. Demons are real. They are out for blood, pouring from the abyss. But by using sigils written in silicon, we can bind them to our command.
Hey there! So today we're taking a look at the original Shin Megami Tensei, the 1992 version for the Super Famicom. This game is a classic among classics, and is basically the father of some of the most influential franchises in RPGs and gaming as a whole. There's a lot to be said about this game. Its music, art and design are sublimely executed, and together they coalesce into a mesmerizing techno-occultic aesthetic. The gameplay, while far from perfect, generally kept me on my toes, and until the late game forced me to think strategically, which in turn pushed me to experiment and engage with its mechanics. Now, this is an old school JRPG, so its appeal is geared towards more of a niche audience. I don't think many people today would enjoy getting lost in monochromatic mazes, while being interrupted every 5 seconds by multiple waves of random encounters. This is a game that requires, above all, patience, as its slow pace can become frustrating if you ever get stuck. Despite this, I do think Shin Megami Tensei is a very worthwhile play, as it strikes at the core of what makes a good role-playing experience. I think so because, and let me get my head inside my ass for a second, it succeeds in establishing meaningful dialogue with the player as they carry out their role. Besides, it's just like, really cool. The game has such a concrete and unique vision, and is able to impose such a grand spiritual tone, despite the fact that the story is held up by crack rock and duct tape. You see, at face value the story is nothing more than cheesy sci-fi, and for the most part, it is. But underneath there's a lot of symbolism at work. The game takes inspiration from history, religion and technology to represent a sort of collective psyche of humanity. And within this framework, the game takes a chance to explore the values that humanity gravitates towards as individuals and collectives, and the results of their logical extremes. As I walk you through the game, you'll see what I mean, and don't worry, I'll make it extra fun. So the game opens up in a sort of prophetic dream sequence, where we're able to name and allocate the initial stats of our character and his party members. From the get-go, the atmosphere is dense. There's ominous music, the scenery is otherworldly, and Joe Rogan's astral projection is staring down at us. Once we finish our character's setup, the entity allows us to progress deeper into the dream, but not before telling us that we shall meet with someone chosen by God, following the path of law, and someone relying solely on their own power, following the path of chaos. Law and chaos are the ideological forces that drive the central conflict of the game, and the game openly nudges us into finding a balance between the two, but we can choose to align ourselves with one or the other as we see fit. After a series of hallways, a spinning crucifix plants itself before us, and the soul of a man is put to hang in there. This is the Law Hero. In the following area we find another soul, this time crushed under a demon. This is a Chaos Hero. Since we're in a 90s setting, I named the Law Hero Keenan and the Chaos Hero Kel. I assigned the stats somewhat at random, focusing Keenan into intelligence and defense, and Kel on strength and speed. As for my protagonist, let's just say that it was good I didn't put any points in magic. There is nothing in-game that warns you about this, but the MC can never learn or use spells, making the stat almost worthless for him. Delving deeper into the dream, we find a woman bathing in a pond. She tells us her name, Yuriko, and explains that she's waiting for us as our eternal partner. I guess this means we're soulmates or some shit. After meandering around some more, our protagonist's mother wakes us up, and as any self-respecting NEET would do, our MC begins his day by shitting his pants and logging into his computer. Online, we see a message from a man called Steven, who just pinged everyone on the server schizo posting about how ancient demons have awakened from their slumber and will soon overrun the earth. His message includes a downloadable file for a so-called demon summoning program, which according to him will help us survive the oncoming cataclysm. Without any hesitation, nor fear of malware, we download it. If we check the computer again, we can see that Steven has sent us a personal message with a user manual attached. This manual tells us that the program is able to translate demon speech, store entities that have agreed to become our minions, and summon them at our command. This basically summarizes the party building mechanic of the game. By negotiating with demons, we can recruit them as allies and have them fight alongside us. Crawling out of our cave, we greet our mother, who gives us our monthly allowance and asks us to go fetch her some coffee. There is nothing else to do in here but to pet our strange looking dog, so we go out into the city. Immediately, we can see that the area is barricaded and under heavy police surveillance. By snooping around, we can learn that the cops are investigating a string of gruesome murders. The hospital, the park and the laboratory are close to us, leaving us only access to the mall, where we are to carry out our errands. Inside, we can share rumors with the locals and buy consumables and equipment too. Honestly, the people in this town are up to some strange shit. For example, the antique store sells guns under the table. There's also a bunch of gangs roaming around, and rumor says that the hospital is performing weird experiments during the late hours of the night. Even stranger, in one of the mall's hallways we can encounter a man having some sort of episode. He's apparently hallucinating, threatening the air with a knife when suddenly a monster manifests out of nowhere and rips his throat apart. The creature then lunges at us, cutting us slightly as it escapes. Left alone with the dying man, our character compassionately steals his knife and walks away. Not wanting any more demons to get the jump on me, I decided to spend my whole allowance buying shopping center armor before getting mom's coffee and heading back home. Back in bed, we have another strange dream. Kinan and Kel are waiting for us, and we pass by Yuriko before meeting the soul of a girl about to be ritually sacrificed. The girl asks us to call out her name, which opens up a text prompt. I chose to call her Maria. The cultists back off in response to our answer, allowing us to untie her. After a brief chat, we assign her stats and wake up. Again, our MC immediately checks his PC, and this time Steven has sent us a mapping program. How he knows that we're the kind of freak that goes around with a computer taped to his arm, I can't tell. But this upgrade is pretty damn useful. Essential even. As you might have noticed, the indoor areas of the game are quite bland and hard to navigate. In most dungeons I had to check the map every 3 or 4 steps to get a hold of my bearings. And to make things worse, the map itself has no indications other than for stairs and elevators. And it also spins around as you change direction, so if you can't rotate an apple inside your head using your imagination, I'm sorry, but this game is not for you. In any case, as we leave home, our mom tells us that she heard us calling out to Maria in her sleep, and coincidentally that's the name of the girl next door. I went to talk to her, but she doesn't remember having any strange dreams. Unsure how to progress, I took a stroll around town, which was now overrun by demons, and got killed by a group of hot zombie women that paralyzed me and beat me to death. This is a hardcore RPG, alright. Status effects are key to victory, and being careless can get you stun-locked or forced into a very unfavorable position. On the same note, if you're smart about tactics and party composition, you can bulldoze through enemies and bosses. Moreover, there's the option of talking during random encounters. If you're good at yapping, you can avoid confrontations, get resources, and most importantly, recruit allies into your party. You just have to watch your mouth. I tried to smooth talk the zombies, but this only made them call for backup, making the fight go from winnable to solidly unwinnable. As I died, I took note of my mistakes and watched the incredibly serene game over sequence. A somber but gentle melody greets us as a vista of a lake and meadow come into view. A voice tells us to not be afraid. They reassure us that we're simply returning to the land where all souls once came from, and we fade into the title screen. Somehow, this scene gives me the same sensation that I get when I drift off into sleep. As I lose consciousness, my dreams become real, and my reality becomes a dream. Memories from waking life take on the same quality as memories of a dream upon waking up, fragmented and unsteady, like sand. Maybe death really is like falling asleep, and life is but a dream. Do you think our protagonist had a good dream? He was attacked by hot zombie women, so I'm inclined to say that it was nice. Anyways, to progress the story we need to head to the local park and meet with a homeless old man. He will rant to us about our destiny and the balance between law and chaos before forcing our soul out of our body. You know, crackhead stuff. In this vision, we appear inside a building, once again accompanied by Keenan and Kel. Without our input, our character climbs to the top story. A vision of our mother flashes before us and asks us to turn back before things get too dangerous. But despite her plea, we push forward. We enter a room occupied by a scientist performing some sort of ritual. The man notices us, pushes us back and transforms into a demon, commencing an unskippable and unwinnable battle. The monster beats us easily and we're forced out of our trance. Back in the park, the old man tells us that we are not ready to face our destiny. As we return home, the police detain us and arrest us under suspicion of murder, given that they found our fingerprints by the corpse inside the mall. Maybe they also saw us tweaking at the park, which probably didn't help our case. So, we're cuffed up and put inside a cell in the town's hospital. In there, we meet with Keenan, who recognizes us from our shared visions. He asks us for help in escaping the place as he's searching for his girlfriend, our neighbor Maria. A doctor comes in to take us away for surgery, and thinking quickly, Keenan charges him, knocking him out. This allows us to escape our cell, but the building is locked electronically, so we have to find a way to deactivate the system. Exploring the building, we find a few other unlucky prisoners, and learn that the hospital is performing human experiments in an effort to create super soldiers. Among the rabble we find Steven, who tells us that he is the idiot who accidentally opened up a hole connecting Earth to the demon realm. The man was researching teleportation technology when, unexpectedly, a monster sprung forth from the machinery and attacked him. The encounter crippled him, but also motivated him to create the demon summoning program. The general of the Japanese Defense Force, a man referred solely as Goto, was aware of the experiment and saw potential in the use of demons as a military force. So he staged a coup and started summoning them en masse. In response to this, Steven distributed a demon summoning program to the public, hoping to balance the scales in what he saw as an upcoming conflict. Though sadly, it seems that very few people actually understood how to use the program. He upgrades our computer with a devil analyzer and tells us to head to the director's office on the second floor. There we should be able to unlock the gates to the outside. After a little bit of dungeon crawling, we get to the office and confront a mad doctor, who transforms into a demon. It's an easy fight, all things considered. We break his knees, flip the switch and skedaddle. Free at last, I return home to heal and save up, only to find the protagonist's mom missing. Ominous. Sleeping didn't seem to trigger any more fever dreams, so I concluded that there was more exploration to be done and headed to the neighbor's house. As I suspected, Maria has disappeared too. Her dad recalls her saying she was headed to Shinjuku, but hasn't heard from her since. We should probably head there, but the town is under lockdown, so there really isn't a clear way to leave. I explored the hospital some more, and after leaving empty-handed, I went to a red building near the park. Inside, I found a healing shaman and a demon fusion laboratory. This might seem somewhat strange to Westerners, but they are common services within Japanese convenience stores, along with ATMs and Shonen Jump magazines. Judging by the colors, this is probably a 7-Eleven. Still, I wasn't able to progress the plot until I went back to the mall. The cafe regulars had a new batch of information to share, which pointed me towards the laboratory and the gang near the shops. Supposedly, the gang leader is looking for someone called Maria, so I decided to go butt heads with him. Arriving at their hangout, we catch them in the middle of a group beatdown against none other than Kel. Not wanting to fight us, they quickly pack up and leave us with the messed up chaos hero. As we help him get to his feet, Kel recognizes us and decides to join the party, though he only does so because he feels safer within a group. Having made decent progress, I went home to save, and this time the MC's mom is there to greet us. Something's not right though, judging by the foreboding music in the background. After our protagonist refuses to get closer, the disguised demon lets the mask slip and reveals that he killed and ate our mother before taking on her image. The fat fuck is still not satisfied though, so he attacks us, starting the game's second boss fight. While this guy is definitely tougher than the doctor, this fight is still not much of a challenge, given that both Keenan and Kel not only have magic powers, but also casually start off with a pistol and a machine gun. After our friends make a no-scope montage out of the demon, the party huddles over for a chat. Keenan tries to console us, telling us to try not to feel too bad about our mom dying, and Kel, in response, white knights for us. These guys are insufferable. But hey, at least our doggy Pascal wants to join the party. I take him with me, along with the laboratory ID dropped by the demon. Now, the next stop is obvious, but on my way I notice that I'm carrying a dead pixie with me, so I make a U-turn and revive her at the shaman. Before getting back on track, I decided to take another peek at the fusion room, and wouldn't you guess, it looks like we're able to mix our dog with the pixie. The procedure dissolved the two fellas in acid, and then recombined them, adding the extra chromosomes necessary to upgrade our mod into a level 43 Toadline exotic bully. Armed with the pinnacle of backyard genetic engineering, I entered the laboratory. Now, I didn't summon him just yet, as there's a cost for using your demons. First, you gotta pay in cash to add them to your active party, but also once summoned they will start to drain a resource called magnetite. Both expenses scale according to the level of the demon in question, and given the difference in such between me and my science fair experiment, I decided it was better to have him in reserve while I mapped out the dungeon. The building is the very same as that of the Hobo Dream, though this time we can explore it carefully in search of items and allies. There's very few things of interest in the lower floors, so much so that the game lets you ride an elevator straight to the top. But having the patience to map out the place will reward you with money and stat boosting items. This will be a common design pattern for much of the game. On the 5th floor, in the hallway before the demon scientist's room, we find Yuriko. She's been stalking us everywhere, both in real life and in her dreams, so despite her words of encouragement, she's starting to seem suspicious. Ready for a rematch with the science team, I summon Pascal and cross the hall. Somehow the scientist recognizes us, meaning that our past encounter wasn't really a vision, but rather some sort of astral projection. Regardless, we rip the guy to shreds. Immediately upon entering the summoning room, Pascal's inbred hyper-aggression kicks in and he jumps at the machinery. The contraption then fires off, causing him to vanish. Logically, this must be a teleportation shtick Steven was working on. We connect our computer to the terminal and use it to transport ourselves to another laboratory in an unknown location. Arriving at the new area, I left the terminal and wandered a bit to get my bearings. In the room closest to us, we can find a friendly zombie, who explains that demons flooded the facility around 3 or 4 days ago. During the attack, everyone was either killed or zombified, so he urges us to escape. A bit further down the hallway, we cross paths with an orc, who welcomes us to Earth. He congratulates us on disguising ourselves as humans, just as he realizes that we are actually, in fact, human. He attacks us and we proceed to fight our way out of the place, revealing that we've landed just south of Shinjuku. The following area is quite big, but since we're currently locked out of most locations, our exploration is reduced to a single place, the Shinjuku Underground Mall. Ideally, the first order of business would be to find the site's terminal. Each main area of the game has one of these machines, and as you use them they get saved into your computer's register, creating a convenient fast travel network. Since they also serve as save points, they essentially become the checkpoints from where all explorations start and end. Our goal in Shinjuku is to find Kenan's girlfriend, Maria, but in doing so our party gets embroiled in a power struggle between 3 factions. We have Goto leading the Japanese military, who in a rousing speech reveals his paranoid delusions that Japan is the target of a political conspiracy. According to him, the nation is to be destroyed in order to establish a totalitarian dictatorship. He plans to use demonic power to combat this and create a utopia where man and demon can coexist peacefully. Then there's the American army, who have begun mobilizing to quell the demonic coup. Doing thorough exploration, we can learn from a defector that they are planning to drop nukes in the event that they are successfully repelled from Japan. Lastly, we have the Resistance, a third party that's been sabotaging both factions in the hopes of buying time before the eruption of a full-blown conflict. Ideally, they want the opposing parties to reach an agreement or a stalemate. We learn that Goto has hired Osawa, the petty gangster that roughed up Kel, and tasked him with finding the leader of the Resistance, a woman coincidentally named Maria. Now these guys have taken the shotgun approach and have resorted to kidnapping all women and girls who carry that name. Logically, the next step should be to confront Osawa and have him tell us where Kenan's girl is, right? Well, no. Here's where I stumbled into a big red herring. Following the breadcrumbs left by some NPCs led me to a building inhabited by a single dripped out kid. He looks fishy and punchable, but in terms of plot progression, he's useless. So what I should have been looking for was a leader of the resistance group. To find her, we need to correctly answer the questions of one of the 4 bartenders present in the underground mall. He will give us a guidebook that we can use to access the secret lair of the resistance. In there, we meet with Maria, the resistance leader, and a literal girl from her dreams. She explains the political situation to us and strikes a plan to stop Osawa and rescue the kidnapped women, to which Keenan and Kel both excitedly agree. It's all nice and peachy until Yuriko appears out of nowhere and kidnaps her using teleportation. So we now have to follow her into the Tokyo government building and prevent Maria's execution. Arriving at the scene, we find her tied to a pole and surrounded by interesting looking people. Taking notice of us, Yuriko summons an army of zombies to come and stop us. This is the first real challenge that the game poses to the player, as we have to fight 4 waves consisting of 8 enemies each. On my first attempt, I got stumped, since I had arrived severely under-equipped and didn't even bother to summon allies. What I needed to do was return to the starting area, fuse some demons together, and buy a machine gun from the antique shop. You see, guns are absolutely overpowered in this game. For one, some firearms are able to hit multiple enemies at once, and in a game where enemies come at you en masse, spraying and praying becomes the most efficient way of dealing damage. But the real power of guns actually lies in their ammo. Bullets function as a non-consumable equipable item that augment your range attacks, some of which will allow you to inflict status effects on enemies. As you can imagine, putting 5 enemies to sleep in a single turn, free of charge, is pretty damn busted. Second to that, I had to establish a solid party composition. For this fight, I got my hands on an angel, which served me both as a healer and a source of holy damage. As an extra, I got a beefy bench warmer to reduce the chances of a party member being singled out and getting killed. After a long fight, we rescue Marie and rendezvous in a bar in Shinjuku. Having earned her trust, she tells us the location of Osawa's gang and her captured namesakes. This causes the party to split, with Keenan heading to the location of the imprisoned women and Kel joining a resistance-led attack on Osawa. We're left alone with Maria, who asks us for help in establishing negotiations with the American ambassador and Goto. We agree to help her and she joins our party. Now, Maria is the game's strongest magic user, as she can learn a huge amount of spells, but as a nice bonus, she also comes with a machine gun of her own, loaded with sleep-inducing bullets. From here on out, it's our choice, and the game starts to branch out. We'll need to visit the American and Japanese factions' bases, and decide how to settle matters with both. Goto's base is the one closest to Shinjuku, so I went there first. We get past the guards with a fake ID and dungeon crawl our way past demons and suicide squads to face the commander himself. The man is the spitting image of Yukio Mishima, not only in visage but also in demeanor. Mishima was a Japanese author and political figure who, much like Goto, was a nationalist and a leader of a failed coup d'etat. He was also a repressed homosexual and jerked off to a painting of Saint Sebastian. In any case, Goto is immediately apologetic about the whole Maria thing and says that he had nothing to do with the attempted execution, rather it was his subordinates being overzealous. I'm not inclined to believe him given that his basement is full of innocent women and children, but he waves things away, saying that he has been focusing on more important matters than capturing the resistance leader. He then goes on a rant about how the Americans are acting under God's orders to establish the 1,000-year kingdom. In other words, a utopia of harmony and peace made just for his followers. Anyone else, though, is in line to be slaughtered, which is why there are nukes currently pointed at the insurgents in Tokyo. The commander reaches out to us for help, but doesn't force us to decide right then and there. This gives us time to meet with the American leader and see his perspective. After sneaking into the US embassy, we meet with Torman, a tall blonde man who speaks to us in broken Japanese. Basically, he says that the Americans swooped in to save everyone from the demonic menace, and that Goto's true plans involve summoning Lucifer, who will bring literal pandemonium with him. This last bit kind of checks out, given that Goto mentioned his goal of having humanity and demonkind living side by side, but still, I think that the ambassador is full of shit, so when he asks for my help, I flat out reject him, though I also reject the notion of joining up with the Japanese insurgents. Going back to Goto, I tell him to shove his plans up his ass. I don't care how bad Japan's birth rate is, I don't wanna commute with demons. In response to our rejection, he sends some minions to come out and kill us, though they're nothing more than fodder. To my surprise, Goto then stands up and confronts us face to face. While the man hit hard and even killed one of my demons, I was more than prepared for the fight. The real danger he poses lies in his binding spell, which turns an affected unit immobile and useless for a sizable number of turns. By using electricity spells to stun him, I was able to spare myself the worst of his attacks and get enough breathing room to heal up my units. After the fight, he lies on his death throes and chastises us by asking if we even stop to consider the consequences of his death. A mighty stupid thing to say, given that he chose to attack us. With him gone, all that's left to do is head back to the embassy and explain the situation to Torman. He's quite surprised at the news of his enemy's death, so much so that he transforms into Thor, the god of thunder. He praises our actions on behalf of capital G God and asks us to continue to fight in his name. But I don't really care about that, so he spurts out and tries to kill us. Now this fight was really easy. I started off by casting a no magic spell, which Maria learned after the fight with Goto. This was sort of a stroke of luck, as I didn't really know what any of the spell names meant and I just wanted to test the new acquisition. The rest of the fight I used lightning to stun him, and all in all he was only able to get in a single hit. Defeated, Thor is pleased to inform us that hot single nuclear missiles are arriving at our location and are ready to mingle. A 30-second timer begins, and run as we might, there is nothing we can do. Just before the nukes hit, Maria casts a teleportation spell, sacrificing herself to get us out of danger. Well, shit. Did my choices bring about this horrible outcome? No, all routes play about the same. An unknown amount of time passes, and we're awakened by a man called Enno Osuno, a legendary Japanese mystic from the year 600 AD. He informs us that two of our friends have also found their way to this place, and that he will explain our situation only after we reunite with them. For our convenience, he allows us to make use of his demonic servants, Senki and Goki, to heal ourselves and save. I leave the room to do just that, and immediately get a random encounter. To my dismay, it seems we lost all of our minions during that teleportation process, so it's just me with no magic and no friends. And in the first turn, the enemy immediately gave me a taste of my own medicine and shocked me into paralysis. At that moment, I got the feeling that this is where the game's difficulty will start to ramp up, and I regret not snatching Maria's sleeping bullets for myself. With this warm introduction to the mid-game, I start my slow journey through the maze that we found ourselves in. First order of business, though, is to recruit a few allies. I immediately get lucky and link up with this ugly turtle thing by bribing him with money and healing items. Recruitment in this game can be very random. Sometimes you will outright fail, sometimes the demon will ask for ridiculously expensive or rare items, and sometimes they will join you without hassle and for free. Before getting into negotiations though, you have to get them to hear you out. When first striking a conversation with a demon, you have to decide your tone. Friendly is for when you want to either recruit them or beg them for cash. Aggressive is for when you want them to fuck off. In general terms, different types of demons have different personalities, and these personalities inform how they react to your responses. For example, some demons will respect your balls when you approach them with your guard lowered, while others will take advantage of this and attack. Some will take kindly to flirting, while others will call HR. Having a higher intelligence stat increases your chances of success across the board, but as a rule you're never allowed to recruit a demon whose level is higher than yours. This last bit also applies to fusion, with the sole exception of Pascal. The logic being that demons don't respect anyone weaker than them, but I guess your dog just loves you. There's also a troublesome benefit that you get when you encounter a demon of the same species as one that is already in your party. If you talk to them, they will recognize you as a friend and end the encounter without conflict. Quite often they will also give you money or items as a gift. Now, the problem is that taking advantage of this shifts your character a bit towards law. If you choose to fight and defeat the demon, you will instead get points towards chaos. Keeping track of this is very annoying during a neutral run, especially since in the mid to late game you start to get locked into certain decisions based on your alignment. But also chaos players just get the short end of the stick in this system. I think this could have been done better if they kept the option of engaging with a friendly or aggressive response, with both having the same effect save for alignment. Fighting could be neutral as not to punish the player for grinding XP. Hell, maybe alignment shouldn't be involved at all, but I digress. Strategically avoiding combat via this mechanic is something we will want to do regardless of alignment, given the size of the dungeon we're currently trapped in. You see, the structure of this place is divided into 3 concentric rings, with the innermost being the smallest and the outermost being the largest. We begin in the inner circle, and until we find Keenan and Kel, we're locked out of the others. Besides those 2 chuckle fucks, our previous demons are waiting for us like lost luggage in some of the dungeon's rooms. Their help is much appreciated since the enemies here are quite a bit tougher, and managing status effects has fully come into play. There were quite a few instances where I was almost stun-locked to death, and without a dedicated healer, status effects and the simple accumulation of damage put a hard cap on my range of exploration. This is the game's way of prompting the player to fully engage with recruitment and fusion, as having a party lacking in numbers, strength or diversity of skills will continuously hamstring your progress. After a while I found Kel hunched over and panicking. I calmed him down by showing him baby sensory videos on my computer and got him to rejoin the group. Not long after I found Keenan, who was on a much more even keel. Both guys were pretty confused since they got teleported midway through their respective missions, but regardless we head back and speak with Japanese Mountain Jesus. No, not the one who escaped dying on the cross by sacrificing his brother and journeyed through Siberia to arrive in Naomori and become a garlic farmer. I mean the other one, the one that literally worshipped mountains. He explains that we're presently in the Kongo Kai, otherwise known in English as the Diamond Realm. This refers to some pretty esoteric Buddhist bullshit, but as far as I understand it, the word diamond is used as a metaphor for wisdom. Wisdom that cuts through all illusions and uncovers an ultimate truth. With this in mind, Osunu's statement about the place being something like the afterlife, and tying it back to what is told to us in the game over sequence, makes me think of the realm as the raw base layer of reality, the bias of the computer, so to speak. Hell, I could extend this theory even further by taking into account that the game's title screen has the womb realm as the background image. This is the other half of the metaphysical map of Buddhism, representing the attribute of compassion. I am not exactly sure what to make of this, but at the very least I can infer that, right now, our characters are somewhere outside of the game. So we're definitely not on Earth, and that might be for the best, since Osuno informs us that a full-blown nuclear holocaust has happened, and civilization is no more. Hope is not over yet though, as humanity has survived, albeit in a barbaric post-apocalyptic state. We can return to our world if we want, but to do so we'll have to carry out some errands. First, he wants us to get some Soma from the Soma Spring. For this task, he opens up the gate to the outermost layer. The outer ring is basically just a big square hallway with rooms in the corners. These rooms are only accessible by a series of one-way doors, which might seem inconsequential given that, you can just walk back around. But the thing is, this is actually a devilish trap. The game really likes to give you random battles whenever you cross a doorway, and to escape a battle, your party has to take a step back on the map. But if the door disappears for esoteric Buddhist reasons, well, you can't flee and you gotta thug it out, which is pretty cool. In one of these corners I find... In one of these corners I find the spring and take a vial of Soma. Disregarding my errand, I drink it and find out it's a healing item. As such, I try to stock up on it, but the game only lets me take one at a time. After an irritatingly long trek back, we hand Osuno the Soma, only for him to tell us to go fetch him a second one. We do that, and he tells us to keep it. Great. Now for next quest we have to head into the middle ring. This central layer is shaped like a horseshoe with a boss monster at each end. Both bosses are guarding a weapon unique to them, and we are to bring them back. Alone. Keenan and Kel are told to fuck off, so it's just us and 3 demons. As you might have guessed, the encounters are Law and Chaos themed. If your alignment matches with one of them, they will give you their weapon without hassle, but otherwise you have to defeat them. Given that I was running neutral, I fought both. These battles are a little bit harder than the usual fare, as the phantasms have very high defenses and deal a fair amount of damage, but as long as you have a woman in your party, you'll be fine. I'm not joking, by the way, female demons usually come equipped with a charm spell. Using this, the bosses basically kill themselves out of horniness. Returning to Enno Osuno, he gives us a third neutral weapon before opening the gate that leads us back to Earth. Reunited with Keenan and Kel, I equip them with their alignment weapons and arrive at the gate to the human realm. Before we leave though, Senki and Goki want to fight. Finally, we're headed back to Earth. The place is, as expected, a mess. The very first person we encounter is a beggar, and we're forced to give him some cash. Seeing our yen, the guy throws a tantrum, calls us a cheap-ass son of a bitch, and says he hopes we become one of Osawa's Shinjuku slaves. The new currency is Maka, and our money has become as worthless as the paper it was printed on. It makes sense that pre-war currencies have become useless, but I didn't expect Osawa to survive. The guy is literally like a cockroach. We could head straight on to meet him, but as we wander through the wasteland, our protagonist gets afflicted by telepathic screams for help, which leads us to Shibuya. In here we find an outpost for a cult called the Order of Messiah, who are building a cathedral to summon God into Earth. They seem well funded and organized, as they are armed with combat squads, and even have a broadcast dedicated to spreading their gospel. On the second floor of the encampment, after a series of dark areas and pitfalls, we find a girl who's paralyzed and possessed. Somehow she knows her name and begs us for help. The Messians believe that this girl is their chosen one, and an old man tells us that there's a psychic in Shinjuku that can project himself into other people's minds. He speculates that with his help, we might be able to save her. I use the terminal in Shibuya, and I am happy to find that I can warp myself straight to Shinjuku. The place hasn't changed a bit, save for the fact that Osawa now rules over the place with an iron fist. So I guess it has changed, the map's just the same. Anyways, while he has struck a deal with local demons so they don't go around on a murder spree, the people still have to answer to him and his private police, who are just violent, selfish goons. Anyone that protests or has complaints is sent to be brainwashed and re-educated. Basically, he's running the town just like a Discord server, yeah. Damn, well, we better find a psychic. In the lower levels of the mall, where the resistance used to hide, we find a psycho diver caged up like an animal. He tells us a sob story about how he's being extorted by Osawa and used like a metaphorical can opener against his enemies. He would fight back, but despite his powers, he knows he'll easily get killed by the gangster's demons. After venting his frustrations, unprompted, he picks up on her aura, calling it abnormal. He says that her soul is inseparably linked to that of her destined partner and that she's in some deep shit. If her condition gets any worse, we could die along with her, so he recommends that we get moving and save her. Looks like we got a win-win situation in our hands. We need to find Osawa, let Kel get his revenge, free the psycho diver, and save the girl. However, things aren't quite so simple. While Osawa is an old man by now, considering that 30 years have passed in her absence, he has quite powerful demons at his command. Upon challenging him, we're forced to retreat, and in his frustration, Kel proposes to fuse with one of her demons. This appalls Keenan, considering that he's giving up his humanity, but personally I'm interested in the outcome of the experiment. The next time we step inside a fusion manor, Kel will select a demon from our party and fuse himself with it. I tried experimenting by forcing his selection via removing demons from my party and seeing if Kel ended up somehow different, but regardless of the demon he chooses, the result will be the same. To be honest, Kel didn't get that much stronger, and we could have beaten the boss without the fusion thing, but whatever. It's not my humanity that's being sacrificed. After the fight, Osawa begs for his life, and regardless of her choices, Kel finishes him off. Feeling like he doesn't need us anymore to survive, and seeing that our attitudes are too soft-hearted, Kel ditches the party and strikes out on his own. With one man down, we free the psycho diver and head once more to Shibuya. The psychic uses his powers to astrally project us into the girl's mind. Inside, we have to run through a maze filled with legally distinct copies of a 1988 horror movie villain and arrive at the core of her soul, where she's being haunted by the demon Arachne. And yes, that is just a woman with a string coming out her ass. The main threat of this boss lies in her use of sleep and charm. At first glance, charm seems like the more troublesome status effect, since it'll make your party members fight amongst themselves, but I found out that if you make the afflicted unit defend, they will simply do nothing. So regardless of which spell she uses, the end result is the same. For this same reason, having multiple healers will come in handy in case one of them gets put out of commission, since as long as you have the boss's incoming damage in check, the fight is just a simple battle of attrition. After defeating Arachne, we have to drag our feet all the way back to the entrance before getting the Psycho Diver to put us back into our bodies. The girl wakes up and we find that she is, surprise surprise, a reincarnated Maria. While she was indoctrinated by the church to be made into their messiah, probably because of her crazy strong psychic powers, given that she retains traces of the memories of her past life, namely memories of us, she instead decides to follow us and assist us in the path of her choosing. With our body back to full strength, it's time to head back out and keep exploring. The strongest lead we have on where to go next comes from the citizens of Shinjuku, who pass around rumors of Roppongi as a supposed safe haven secluded from the rest of the wasteland. The area is apparently isolated by a magic barrier, and whoever finds their way inside is said to never return. While some believe this is because there's no reason to leave safety behind, a man swears to have peeked in, only to find a city of zombies. After some exploration, we find ourselves inside the city by means of a hidden passageway. The place seems safe as safe can be, until we find Keenan's girlfriend. She confirms that she, along with the rest of the town, are nothing but reanimated corpses. Unlike the other undead, she has retained her memories and wishes she could be left to rest in peace. The town, as it turns out, is a personal project of two demons, the Red Count and the Black Baron, who built it to protect and entertain a young girl named Alice. They use the undead citizens as puppets to play with the girl and make her feel less alone, but I gotta say, they've spoiled her rotten because when we meet her, not only does she ask us to die, but goes so far as to throw a tantrum when we don't kick the bucket on the spot. Alice calls the Baron to come and kill us, and we're forced to run away, given that our attacks are completely ineffective. According to a bartender in Shinjuku, we need to find a magical pot to defeat the Baron. This item is hidden in the lower levels of Roppongi, following a series of traps. Using it, we're able to capture the demon inside and handle him like a neckbeard would a Pinkie Pie figurine. Our victory is very short-lived though, as Yuriko once more appears out of nowhere and forces us to hand the item over. As we leave the office, we are intercepted by the Black Baron. He stretches his silly hands to come and grab us, but Keenan pushes us out of the way, taking the hit for us. This is bad news, as the Baron rips the guy's soul out of his body before running away. Now we have to head to the basement and confront him in his office. If we stop by the disco on our way down, not only we can see the citizens as the decaying corpses that they are, but also Keenan's body, happily hanging out with them. A bit later, I found Keenan's spirit stored in a warehouse, along with that of another guy. According to them, this giant dollhouse of a town is quite eco-friendly, as it's powered by consuming their souls. So we go fight the Baron, who I defeated easily with shock and charm, and freed Keenan. He thanks us, but sadly his body has already passed away. While he regrets not being able to save his girl, he is ready to move on to the afterlife. A messenger of God senses his great faith and escorts him to heaven, to the feet of the big man himself. With the barrier around Roppongi gone, we now have a new set of areas to explore, all connected through a central hub called the Great Crossroads. This marks the beginning of the mid-game, and to be quite honest, it's incredibly meandering and doesn't present anything too interesting beyond the escalation of conflict. In summary, we discover that Keenan has been revived as a messiah of the Law faction and is now behaving like a self-righteous prick. Kel, on the other hand, has sided with the Chaos faction and turns us in to be judged by one of their leaders. If we are law-aligned or choose to not cooperate with them, we will be imprisoned, but our friend will secretly let us free. Yuriko reveals herself to be the demon Lilith, and frustrated that we are not seduced by her, settles as Kel's girlfriend. Most importantly, Steven is still alive and rocking his wheels. Eventually, we're presented with a similar choice to that of the opening act of the game. The construction of the Great Cathedral has reached its end, and we can choose to side with the Gaians who want to take it over to summon Lucifer, with the Messians who are trying to summon God, or of course we can also remain neutral and take the Cathedral for ourselves. But before starting the final act, we can do some side quests to get the best weapons and armor in the game. By siding with the Messians, you get the Jesus armor, by siding with the Gaians, you get the Tenma armor, and by being neutral, you can get the Masakado armor. There's also a secret sword you can find and then fuse with special elemental demons, which are only obtainable via special fusions or trading rare drops. Fusing the sword with these guys will progressively evolve it until it becomes the flaming sword Hinokagutsuchi. Within the cathedral, we find both of our former friends engaging in a shouting match, and after running a side quest for either of them, God will flood the earth. Fun fact, did you know Japan is one of the few cultures without a flooding myth? Probably because tsunamis make it more fact than fiction, but what do I know? In any case, we're tasked with one last errand, where we are to befriend a sea monster and traverse the flooded remnants of Tokyo before being allowed to tackle the final dungeon. After that, our friends will proclaim that the next time either of us meet, it'll be a fight to the death. Upon entering the heart of the cathedral, the crackhead of destiny, the one from the beginning of the game, tells us that the Archangel Michael is issuing orders from the 8th floor, while the demon Ashura leads chaos in the 8th level of the basement. These are our final bosses. To claim victory through the neutral route, we must traverse all 16 floors, defeat 4 archangels, 4 demon lords, and confront our former friends. After going through Surt, Astaroth and Arok, we meet with Kel. He tells us that our ideal of balance is a waste of time, as the scales are meant to be tipped one way or the other. We fight, and on his last breath he asks if this was all just a dream. Was it a nightmare, he says? No, it was a good dream, he concludes. It had hot zombie women, so it was nice. We press on further and get to the bottom floor. The demon lord Ashura mocks us for trampling on our friend's corpse and promises to send us down to meet with him soon. This boss has a huge amount of health and deals a lot of damage. By this point, however, you're pretty much overpowered, so it shouldn't be an issue as long as you're able to heal, and if you're capable of reflecting his physical attacks back at him, all the better. The defeated Ashura laments on how close they were able to get to attaining Lucifer's utopia, but a voice reassures us that we did the right thing. Still, we have to defeat Michael in order to restore balance. So we blitz through Uriel, Gabriel and Raphael, and we meet with Keenan. Much like Kel, he tells us that the balance we seek doesn't exist. He goes on about how those who do not submit themselves towards God must die, especially the powerful, as according to him, power unfettered by law is evil. Through that line of reasoning, he has no choice but to slay us, and thus commences the fight. Upon being defeated, he recognizes the grip of death taking over him again. In his final moments, he comes to his senses and realizes he was being used as nothing more than a tool, meant to be discarded at a moment's notice. We leave his remains behind and meet with Michael, who calls us a mockery of a savior, who not only rejects the hand of God, but stoops so low as to kill his own friend. He calls us arrogant, acting as if our judgment is superior to God's, though he muses that maybe we're not even conscious of that, and have just capitulated to our instincts. Regardless, he vows to throw us into the fires of hell. While Michael has a higher focus on dealing damage, the strategy for defeating him is the same as Ashura's: heal, reflect, and persist. In the face of defeat, Michael begs God for forgiveness and laments his own weakness. Having finished our job, we climb to the summit of the cathedral, where we meet with Laoshe, the real form of the Vargrant who's been guiding us all along. He congratulates us on doing the impossible, and begins reflecting on the path we've taken, weighing the meaning of both chaos and law. He muses that while laws and regulations are necessary to uphold peace, a world of total law would prohibit the freedom of mind and action that are necessary to achieve true happiness. Total freedom and exaltation of the individual, on the other hand, is certainly alluring and exciting, but would consequently breed never-ending conflict. While our fight against the forces of law and chaos are over, he reminds us that our struggle has only just begun, as we'll have to take on the task of rebuilding. He tells us to keep in mind the common thread that exists between everything, and to not forget that we are but a small part of a grand universe that operates as a whole. The credit sequence rolls and Maria has a final chat with us. She reminisces of the countless sparks of joy, sorrow, hatred and love that were snuffed out as a result of this conflict. The damage is irreparable, but somehow she knows that all that was lost will come back and be reborn, just the way that she was. We end the chapter of destruction and turn the page towards creation. If we are to choose to side with either law or chaos, we must either use parts of the demon lords to create the demon ring, or fuse 3 archangels to create the angel ring. The law hero or chaos hero will wear it, respectively, to open up the path to either Michael or Ashura, and their body will blow up in the process. In the law ending, a servant of God congratulates us and encourages us to convert the rest of humanity into our faith. He promises a world full of happiness, peace and prosperity, ruled by justice, order, law and security. God is nowhere to be seen yet, but the game ends nonetheless. In the chaos ending, Lucifer receives us atop of the cathedral and proclaims the beginning of a new golden age for Earth. with the old gods condemned to the abyss returning once more to live side by side with humanity. He vows to not violate the trust we have placed in him, promising to not rest until both his subjects and we humans enjoy an unprecedented level of freedom. In his world of chaos, the natural order will reign supreme, and the strongest and most beautiful specimens will survive and reproduce, pushing existence to ever-increasing heights in a never-ending cycle of life and death. Lastly, he warns us to remember that the god of law is not gone or dead, and that he, Lucifer, is but a part of him, one that was intentionally discarded, but a part of him nonetheless. He tells us to ponder that well before he flies off into the moon. Well, I suppose this is as good a point as any to start asking what the game is going on about. Let's begin by thinking a bit about the meaning of law and chaos. Law, as a faction, is a collectivist utilitarian group that pushes for homogeneity. This is represented both in the Americans, from the angle of a post-World War II global mediator, and the Messians, who are styled from the image of Abrahamic faith. The proponents of law choose to sacrifice the few in favor of the many. We see this clearly in the opening act, when nuclear bombs are dropped in Tokyo in order to stop the oncoming demonic invasion, even if you are to aid them by defeating Goto. In this idea of acting for the greater good, the Messian goal of the 1,000-year kingdom rises as a one-size-fits-all justification. Following their logic, there is no cost too high for bringing an eternal utopia of peace and prosperity, as its value can be stated to be infinite. It's basically a trolley problem, where on one hand you sacrifice a finite amount of lives by pulling the lever, and on the other you sacrifice an infinite amount of eternal lives by abstaining from doing so. Their zealousness, while often taken to the extreme of metaphorical and literal brainwashing, does have its merits, as it allows them to band together and bring about things that no individual could ever achieve on their own. This is most evidently shown with the Cathedral, a structure that represents the culmination of multiple lifetimes worth of work and hardship, but also with the rate of their technological advancement. While the Gaians are shown to dress and act primitive, the Messians are technologically savvy, enhancing their abilities with science and using telecommunications to their advantage. Law could be said to be the superego of the human spirit, the power of ourselves that reasons, judges, orders, and oppresses in order to bring about what it deems most right. The problem, though, is that much like God in the ending, perfect righteousness never seems to arrive. In this dichotomy, chaos then stands on the other end, representing the id, as the expression of one's natural instincts and the need to serve oneself. While the proponents of chaos tout freedom of thought and action as a virtue, their might makes right attitude inevitably leads to the formation of hierarchy, and thus the establishment of an authoritarian form of law, as we saw in both Osawa's Shinjuku and the zombie city of Roppongi. I think this explains Lucifer's final lines in the Chaos ending, when he reveals himself to be an aspect of God. Basically, we're being told that the law of the jungle is still a form of law. Now, while law feels Christian, chaos is very much pagan. It is outright told to us that many of the demons we deal with in the game are in reality old gods who were cast into the abyss. This parallels the real-world demonization of indigenous religious figures by Abrahamic faiths. What the cult of Gaia seeks to achieve is to release all of these demons back into the world, and then let natural selection take its course. If we choose to view Shin Megami Tensei's demons as a metaphor for the ideas, identity, and values of a culture, we can see that the Gaians are simply choosing to put merit on the ones most capable of surviving. In the same line of thought, we can say that the mechanic of demon fusion alludes to the merging of ideas and cultures, a transformation undertaken as a natural result of both competition and collaboration. In an odd way, this also ties with the Gaian choice of aesthetics, that of Shinto and Buddhism. Shinto is Japan's indigenous religion, and in very few words consists of the animist worship of nature, concepts, and things. Buddhism is an import from India to China to Japan, and basically says, born to die, the world is a fuck. If you don't like it, stop caring so much. In Japan, Shinto and Buddhism are practiced in a very mixed, free-flowing way. The first celebrates life, while the other gives a framework to deal with suffering and death. So Eastern-looking chaos is flexible and polytheistic, while Western-looking law is rigid and monotheistic. As for Goto's relation to the Chaos faction, I think that it simply lies on the fact that he is modeled after an ultra-nationalist, someone who puts the interests of a single nation above all others as a result of their extreme sense of identity. In the middle of of all of this, we're left with a neutral alignment, which isn't really a faction but more of a stance. The figures that represent neutrality, Eno Osuno, Laoshe, and Steven, could be said to be enlightened humans, representing spirituality, philosophy, and science. Neutrality sees that there is no space for humanity at the extremes of either alignment, and seeks to leave the human world in the hands of humans. It doesn't subscribe to any particular idea, read demon, because it understands that good and bad can often be circumstantial. I think it is also important to note that it doesn't preach indecisiveness, impartiality, or inaction. Hell, you end up killing basically everyone in the neutral route. Rather, it warns against getting attached to a belief so strongly that you leave your humanity behind. The game's use of computers as a tool to manipulate and summon demons is a concept borrowed from the collection of pulp fiction novels it is loosely based on, titled Digital Devil's Story. The idea for these books came about during the author's youth, while he worked at an electronic manufacturer. Through the lens of his lifelong interest on the esoteric, Mr. Nishitani saw a parallel between electronic circuits, computer logic, and the procedures of Western occultic practices. And thus, he mused that through code, one could probably simulate the environment and practice necessary to conduct a ritual. And if that were to be true, then spirits, of course, should be able to be summoned and travel through the internet. More than 30 years after the release of the game, this idea rings more true than ever, with information technologies becoming a light-speed superhighway for the transmission of culture. And if a monitor really works as a summoning circle, then it would be wise to heed the game's warning and take care of not letting any demons possess your body.